Okay, welcome everyone. I think people will be joining throughout the whole webinar, but we can start. And yeah, my name is Anna. I am your moderator today, and I would like to start with several technical announcements. So first of all the participants who are joining us will be muted and your cameras are off. However, you're of course always still able to actively participate in our webinar via the chat function, and our technical moderator, Katrin, will make sure we are not missing any questions. After the brief presentation of our speakers, there will be a dedicated Q&A session, so please write your questions as soon as they arise and we will make sure to ask them. This webinar is streamed on YouTube and recorded. And lastly, on the technical side, today's webinar will partially take place in Spanish with consecutive translation. We will have some speakers doing the presentation in Spanish and translated bit by bit. And the Q&A session will be translated as well. And I would like to thank very much Itzel, who agreed to help us today with the translation. Thank you. And finally, welcome everyone to this part of Life as an Activist webinar. In this series, which consists of 5 webinars, we are focusing on realities, daily tasks, challenges of democracy activists from around the world. We want to show you the varieties of democracies that exist around the world, the varieties of democracy activism, and the challenges around the world. And even though the situation in different countries can be totally different, we still believe we can learn from each other and inspire more people to become democracy activists in their countries. We, in a way, declared November a month of activism at Democracy International. Every Wednesday we will have webinar dedicated to activism and state of democracy in different regions, different countries. We already had 2 webinars. This is our 3rd one, and 2 more are ahead of us. And of course, we are always welcome to see you in our upcoming webinars. You can join us at Zoom here by this link, or at democracy.community, where you can follow the session live right now or rewatch after the webinar. And before starting, we would like to thank Engagement Global and the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development for sponsoring these videos. Without them, these webinars will probably not be taking place. Before, we already talked about youth activism in Ukraine and Georgia, democracy in the region, and the implications of war on the Black Sea region. And last week, we focused on democratic backsliding in Tunisia and threats to activism in Tunisia, Middle East, and Northern Africa, and protection of minorities in the region. And today, we are focusing on activism in societies torn by conflicts, potential of direct democracy in peace building, and activism activists in the political offices. And we would put today our attention to Colombia and Latin America. We will dive into activism and direct democracy and how and whether these tools can lead the region into a more inclusive and more sustainable future. And finally, I am thrilled to introduce our speakers. We have 3 guest speakers today, and in no particular order, I would like to introduce you to Mendelson Mosquera Quita, the director of the National Association of Victims of Peace and a member of departmental roundtable of effective participation of victims of Antioquia. And he will be talking about the work he's doing, activism of supporting activists and victims of conflict and activists in the office. Our second speaker, Maria Alejandra Victorina Jimenez, is a political advocacy coordinator at Instituto de Política Abierta. She currently works at the Open Policy Institute on issues of political and public innovations, and will speak about the projects they're doing and the political culture in Colombia and in the region. And finally, Alejandro Baez Corredor is our third speaker and is a researcher for the Barometer Initiative and monitors participation components of the final agreement. He's political scientist, has been teacher and researcher, and also worked in a public sector. He will describe to us the peace agreement and the current state of the agreement's implementation. And I would like to kick our webinar off with Alejandro. Thank you, and please, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks for the invitation, and good afternoon for you. For us, it's still good morning. And I will do my presentation in Spanish with the help of Itzel for the traduction. So I will share a presentation. Do you see it?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Bueno. Entonces, lo primero para señalar es que en 2016 el gobierno colombiano y la guerrilla de las FARC firmaron un acuerdo de paz.
Well, first of all, it is important to say in 2016, the government of Colombia and the guerrilla de las FARC signed a peace agreement.
Para terminar un conflicto armado entre esos dos actores de más de 50 años.
To put an end to an armed conflict between those two parties that lasted over 50 years.
Ese acuerdo, digamos, es un acuerdo integral porque aborda, digamos, diferentes causas del conflicto armado en Colombia.
That agreement is an integral agreement that talks about different parts of the armed conflict in Colombia.
Y está compuesto por 6 puntos que tocan desde los problemas en el campo hasta los problemas de la participación política.
That agreement is built with 6 different tracks that talk about things starting from the farm, farm, and all the way to the political participation.
El Instituto CROC, del cual hago parte, tiene el mandato oficial de hacerle seguimiento a la implementación de este acuerdo en Colombia.
CROC Institute, which I take part of, has institutional mandate to follow up with the implementation of this agreement all the way through Colombia.
Yo en particular le hago seguimiento al punto 2, que es el que aborda los problemas sobre participación política.
And myself in particular have the task of following up in the second point that has to do with political participation.
Entonces, este segundo punto parte de reconocer que una de las causas del conflicto armado en Colombia ha sido la dificultad para que varios actores puedan participar políticamente.
The second point starts specifically with the difficulty of several parties that participate in the conflict in Colombia.
Y estos obstáculos para la participación tienen que ver con, por ejemplo, digamos, condiciones de seguridad.
These challenges for participation have to do with security obstacles for participation,
pero también con obstáculos normativos e institucionales que imposibilitan que muchos actores puedan participar en el sistema político.
but also with normative and institutional challenges that prevent a lot of people from participating in the institutional area.
En ese sentido, el acuerdo tiene dos objetivos. Uno es abrir, digamos, el sistema político a otras fuerzas políticas.
In that sense, this subject has two objectives. The first one is to open the political system.
Y el segundo es profundizar la democracia mediante ajustes normativos e institucionales.
And the second one is to deepen democracy through adjustments in the institutional.
Es importante señalar que la participación es concebida de una manera amplia y no solamente aquella que se da por vías electorales.
It is important to highlight that participation is conceived broadly and not only as the participation through electoral elections,
sino también a través de otras modalidades como la movilización social, los medios de comunicación, las veedurías ciudadanas.
but also through other modalities such as social mobilization, public media, and citizens' assemblies.
Este punto está dividido como en tres pilares.
This point is divided into three pillars.
El primero son las garantías para el ejercicio de la oposición política.
The first one is the guarantees for the exercise of political opposition.
El segundo son los mecanismos democráticos para la participación ciudadana.
The second one is the democratic mechanisms for citizen participation.
Y el tercero son las medidas para generar una mayor participación por vía electoral.
And the third one are the measures to promote greater electoral participation.
Desde el instituto hacemos seguimiento a 94 disposiciones.
Sorry, from the institute, we make a following of 94 stipulations.
Que son compromisos pactados, es decir, una disposición es un compromiso pactado concreto pues en el acuerdo de paz.
These dispositions are agreed compromises.
Este es el estado de la implementación del punto 2 desde la firma en el 2016 hasta septiembre del 2023.
This is the state of the implementation from point 2 from December 2016 till September 2023.
Como podemos ver, el 27% de las disposiciones todavía no han iniciado su implementación.
As we can see, 27% of the dispositions have not started yet.
Y el 41% de esas disposiciones apenas tienen algunas acciones iniciales para su implementación.
And the 41% of these dispositions have just started to have some activities regarding their implementation.
Entonces, de acuerdo con nuestra metodología, aproximadamente el 70% del punto todavía no tiene viabilidad para completar su implementación en el tiempo pactado.
So according to our methodology, around 70% of these dispositions do not have the viability to finish or to to be able to be accomplished in the deadlines that were suggested.
Y digamos, ese es un asunto grave porque estamos a punto de llegar a la mitad del periodo de implementación.
This is a serious subject because we're halfway through the time pacted for the implementation of the agreement.
¿Qué se ha implementado hasta ahora? Digamos que estas son las principales medidas que ya están completas y se han implementado hasta este momento.
So what has been implemented so far, these are the main measures that had been implemented up to date.
El primero es el Estatuto de la Oposición, que es una ley que brinda ciertos derechos a los partidos que se declaren en oposición.
The first one is the opposition statute, which is a law that gives certain rights to the political parties that are in as an opposition.
El segundo avance es la conformación de una misión especial electoral que se encargó de hacer recomendaciones
The second one is the integration of a special electoral mission that has the task of making recommendations
para generar una reforma del sistema de partidos y el sistema electoral.
to generate a reform in the electoral system and the political party system.
El tercer avance es la creación de las circunscripciones especiales de paz.
The third one is the creation of the special transitory peacebuilding districts.
Que digamos, son zonas donde se eligieron congresistas adicionales
These are areas where additional Congress have been elected
para representar a las víctimas del conflicto armado.
to represent the victims of the armed conflict.
Y finalmente tenemos la creación del Consejo Nacional de Paz, Reconciliación y no estigmatización y convivencia.
Finally, we have the creation of the National Council of Peace, Reconciliation, and Coexistence.
Todavía, digamos, hay otros avances, pero estos son los más importantes.
There are other breakthroughs, but these are the most important.
Ahora, estos son los compromisos que están pendientes todavía por cumplir, es decir, todavía no han sido implementados.
These are the tasks that are pending to do, meaning they have not been implemented yet.
El primero y uno de los más importantes es la implementación del sistema integral de seguridad para el ejercicio de la política.
First one, and one of the most important ones, is the implementation of the comprehensive security system for the exercise of politics,
que intenta brindar garantías de seguridad para los liderazgos sociales y para quienes participan, digamos, en la política electoral.
This system has to give guarantees of security for the participation of leaderships and citizens working towards this.
El segundo pendiente es una ley de garantías para la promoción de la participación ciudadana.
The second thing pending to do is the law of guarantees and promotion of citizen participation,
que apunta principalmente a fortalecer las organizaciones y los movimientos sociales en Colombia.
that aims primarily to strengthen citizen mobilizations and citizens organizations in Colombia.
El tercero es una reforma política y electoral
The third one is a political and electoral reform
para transformar las reglas del sistema electoral en Colombia.
to transform the electoral rules in Colombia.
Y finalmente está la creación de un canal de televisión para partidos y movimientos políticos.
And finally, there is the creation of an institutional TV channel for political parties and movements.
Ya para terminar mi presentación, quisiera señalar los retos más importantes todavía en términos de participación política en el país.
To wrap up the presentation, I would like to present the principal challenges for political participation in the country that are yet to be implemented.
El primero es garantizar condiciones de seguridad para quienes ejercen la política o para quienes son líderes o lideresas sociales.
The first one is to guarantee security conditions for those people who exercise politics or are involved in social leadership.
Esto debido a que todavía tenemos cifras muy altas de violaciones a los derechos humanos de estas personas, principalmente de los liderazgos sociales.
We still have high numbers of breachments in human rights, especially for these people, the social leaders.
El segundo reto tiene que ver con hacer ajustes institucionales y normativos para mejorar las condiciones para la participación.
The second challenge has to do with regulatory and institutional adjustments to provide better conditions for participation.
Y en particular para permitir que en el sistema electoral puedan participar nuevas fuerzas políticas.
In particular, to allow for new electoral in particular to allow new political forces to participate in the elections.
Y el último desafío es implementar medidas diferenciales para fortalecer la participación de actores que han sido históricamente excluidos.
And last challenge is to implement differential measures to strengthen the participation of historically excluded persons.
Especialmente de las mujeres y de las personas que pertenecen a los pueblos étnicos.
Especially for women and people that are part of ethnic communities.
Porque estas personas tienen obstáculos adicionales para poder participar en la política electoral o por otras vías.
Because these population have particular and specific challenges and obstacles to participate in the electoral politics and other subjects.
En conclusión, entonces hemos avanzado en algunas cosas, pero todavía tenemos un camino largo para implementar este acuerdo de participación política.
To sum up, we have had some big advances in some of these things, but we still have a long way to go for the implementation of the needed things, and especially in the political participation subject.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for such a detailed presentation on the current peace agreement status. And before introducing our second speaker, I would like to remind our participants that you're always welcome to write your questions in the chat as they arise. And in the Q&A session, we will have a chance to voice them. And with that, I would like to invite Mendelson, please. Yeah, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for joining us.
Es tu turno, Mendelson.
Hola, yo soy Mendelson Mosquera, vivo en el departamento de Antioquia. La acción es el Urabá antioqueño en Colombia. Mendelson Mosquera es un líder social, defensor de derechos humanos y preocupado por las causas sociales en nuestro país de Colombia.
Perdón, Mendelson, te traduzco, ¿sí? Hi, I'm Mendelson Mosquera. I am from Antioquia in Colombia. Mendelson Mosquera is a social leader worried and preoccupied for the social causes of our country.
Quiero contar la experiencia que he tenido en el trabajo con derechos humanos a raíz también del acuerdo final de paz entre el gobierno nacional, Estado colombiano y las extintas FARC.
I'd like to tell you about my experience regarding human rights within the final peace agreement between the Colombian government and the former FARC.
Yo soy desplazado de San José de Apartado. En su momento, por las guerrillas, estaba la FARC, un territorio que ha sido altamente golpeado por la violencia.
I am myself, I have been displaced from San José de Apartado from the guerrillas. This is an area which have suffered a lot of violence.
Me comprometí a participar en las mesas de víctimas creadas por la Ley de Víctimas y Restitución de Tierras y desde allí visibilizar las dificultades y necesidades que vivimos la población en las zonas rurales de Colombia.
I made a commitment to visualize and fight for the law and rights of victims and the restitution of their lands in the rural area in Colombia.
Cuando se firma el acuerdo de paz, nosotros, como víctimas del conflicto, campesinos y personas vulnerables, pensamos en ayudar a construir escenarios de participación.
When the final peace agreement was signed, us, people from the rural area and marginalized communities, made a commitment to build new participation spaces.
Pero hubo un gran reto y es que los líderes sociales no sabíamos hacer política como lo hace cualquier parlamentario en el país.
But there was a big challenge because us social leaders did not know how to do politics, such as any congressman in the country.
Esto ocasionó desmotivaciones, decepciones, ocasionó que algunos desistieran del proceso electoral. Yo fui candidato a una de las circunscripción transitoria especial de paz, que es una curul de paz y que nace en este acuerdo.
These led to deception and some people quitting the electoral path. Sorry. Me myself, I was a candidate for a peace seat in one of the forums that were built for this peace treaty.
Bueno, uno de los grandes retos fue que para hacer política debíamos tener presupuesto como candidatos, situación...
One of the bigger challenges was that for us to make politics, we needed a budget.
Fue difícil porque un defensor de derechos humanos carece de 500, 200, de 100 millones de pesos colombianos para hacer política en un territorio.
It was hard because social advocates like us, we lack of 100 million pesos colombianos to make this kind of politics.
Pues la comunidad que debíamos visitar, es decir, los electores viven en las zonas rurales dispersas más apartadas de las cabeceras urbanas.
Because voters that we were supposed to be visiting live in some of the most farther away rural areas regarding the main cities centers.
Bien, algunos compañeros quedaron electos hoy como representantes de las víctimas y campesinos que viven en los municipios PEDET, que son programas de desarrollo con enfoque territorial creados por el Acuerdo de Paz.
Some of our colleagues were elected as representatives of the victims and farmers in the areas that have a program with perdón, ¿me recuerdas cuál era el programa? El
Estos
programa.
programas de desarrollo con enfoque territorial, PEDET.
Development programs with territorial focus.
Bien, fueron ideas e iniciativas que propusimos campesinos y campesinas para un mejor territorio, una mejor comunidad, construir escuelas, un mejor centro de salud y mejores vías.
These ideas and initiatives were proposed from farmers for to have a better territory and better conditions, such as schools, health centers, and transport. Yes.
A través de estos programas mejoraría la economía en las zonas rurales. Es decir, sacaríamos la cosecha del campo para los centros urbanos.
Through these programs, the economic development of rural areas would improve, meaning we would take our farmings and from the field to the cities.
Pero una de las dificultades es la falta de voluntad política en su momento. El gobierno anterior mostraba un poco de resistencia para la implementación del acuerdo.
One of the bigger difficulties was the lack of political willingness. The former government did not have a good disposition to implement these kind of programs.
Hoy tenemos un gobierno que, si bien es cierto, es empático con el acuerdo de paz, con la restitución de los derechos de las víctimas.
Today we have a government that, even if it is empathetic with the restitution of the community's rights,
también es cierto que hace falta presupuesto, financiación e interés de la fuerza en el Congreso de la República para la toma de decisiones.
It is also true that we are lacking budget and financing for this implementation and a lack of compromise from the Congress.
Tenemos actualmente 16 congresistas por las curules de paz.
Right now we have 16 congresspeople from the peace seats.
16 que representan los derechos civiles, políticos, económicos y culturales de las víctimas y campesinos.
That represent the civic, political, and economic and cultural rights of the people in the field.
Pero que hace falta mayor sincronización y trabajo en equipo con la comunidad.
They're still missing a bigger synchronization and work hand by hand with the communities.
Como también hacen falta que algunos mandatarios locales se apropien de las iniciativas propuestas por los campesinos y campesinas.
There's also missing that local mandates appropriate the initiatives set from the farmers.
Esto permitiría que las zonas que fueron mayormente afectadas por la violencia tengan mayor dignidad para la población y equidad en derechos humanos.
This would allow for the most affected communities to have better dignity and equality in their human rights.
Por ahora, este servidor, desde las mesas de participación de víctimas, visibiliza los derechos de las personas que viven en las zonas más afectadas por la violencia.
For now, I am working from the forums of participation of victims to visualize their current status and the challenges that they face.
Otro elemento que considero importante mencionar
Another element that I consider important to mention
es la pedagogía y la difusión de la información de los organismos e instancias que crea el acuerdo de paz.
Another thing is that I consider mentioning is the pedagogy and dissemination of the information regarding organizations and institutions created by the peace agreement.
Por ejemplo, la Jurisdicción Especial para la Paz debe llegar a todos los rincones del país.
For example, the Special Jurisdiction of Peace must reach every corner of the country.
La unidad de búsqueda de personas desaparecidas también debe llegar a través de los colegios e instituciones educativas.
Also, the area that is searching for disappeared people must reach every corner through the schools and academic network.
Es decir, no solamente en los 170 municipios que fueron priorizados por el acuerdo de paz, sino a todos los departamentos, municipios de Colombia.
Meaning not only the 170 municipalities prioritized for the peace agreement, but also all the other municipalities that conform Colombia.
Que permita que las comunidades se informen, que los territorios indígenas se informen, que las comunidades negras, afros, raizales y palenqueras de Colombia estén enterados de manera constante de los derechos que traen con el sistema integral.
This would allow indigenous communities, Afro-Colombian communities, to be constantly informed and aware of their rights regarding the system, the integral system that Alejandro mentioned.
Otro elemento importante es la forma de entender la reincorporación.
Another important element is the way of understanding the reincorporation.
Aún existen barreras para que estas personas que dejaron las armas accedan a educación, a salud, al trabajo y a una vida corriente como cualquier colombiano.
There are still some barriers for people who left aside the arms to incorporate themselves into education, health, security, and work, just as any other Colombian citizen.
porque existe la estigmatización, los señalamientos o el rechazo a muchos de estas personas que buscan una vida civil.
There is still a lot of rejectment towards these people that are looking for a regular life and stigmatization.
Y algunos medios de comunicación masivo invaden a la comunidad de información que genera mucha confusión en la sociedad.
There are some national media that invades communities and promotes disinformation and confusion amongst the people in Colombia.
Entonces, se ve un poco lejana la reconciliación y la vida pacífica entre todos y todas.
Therefore, the reconciliation and pacific life that we all aim seems a bit further away than we wished for.
Como también se observa con mucha notoriedad
We also see notoriously
que los defensores de derechos humanos, líderes y lideresas sociales, continuamos en riesgos por levantar la voz del que no tiene voz.
Therefore, human rights advocacies and social leaders do not have still the security enough to raise the voice for those who cannot raise it.
Continúa siendo un peligro recuperar la voz, como lo dijo el autor brasilero, porque nos señalan cada vez que denunciamos, que visibilizamos la corrupción y dificultades que se presentan en los territorios.
Because when people say that we visualize corruption and difficulties that communities face.
Sin embargo, representar a la población como defensor de derechos humanos, para mí sigue siendo una vocación de servicio.
Nevertheless, to represent the community and their human rights is my commitment and my final goal.
Y continúo siguiendo los pasos de Nelson Mandela en materia de derechos humanos.
I keep on following the steps of Nelson Mandela regarding human rights.
Porque es la forma de aprender a vivir juntos en la sociedad.
Because it is the only way to learn how to live together in this society.
Es necesario que Colombia trabaje, aumente los esfuerzos para la financiación y la implementación del acuerdo de paz.
It is necessary that Colombia keeps on working to strengthen and the efforts in financing and the implementation of the peace agreement.
Pero esto es más relevante con el apoyo de la comunidad internacional.
But this would be more relevant with the support of the international community.
Es decir, con visitas.
This means with visits.
Con acompañamiento de las naciones.
With the follow-up and companionship of the nations.
Y con diferentes oportunidades presupuestales para nuestro país.
And with different budget and financial.
Yo quiero mencionar que la paz es el camino. Para la guerra nada, para la paz todo.
I want to say that with the peace is everything, for peace everything, for war nothing.
Creo que con esto puedo terminar mi intervención.
I think with this I can finish up my intervention.
Thank you very much for such an insightful overview of your work. And now I would like to once again remind our audience that you're always very welcome to write your questions in the chat, and we will go to your questions very, very soon. And now I would like to give our online stage to Maria Alejandra, our final speaker for today.
Hey, how are you? Hey, everyone. I don't know if you can see me too. Well, let me change my position. So nice to meet you. I'm Maria Alejandra, also from Colombia, advocacy coordinator of a civil organization here in Colombia called Instituto of Open Policy. That it means that we are trying to imagine the institutions open, transparent for the citizens, and obviously trying to imagine institutions that trying to involve the citizens in the decision-taking process. So I would like to talk in general about what we are doing in Colombia and how our organization works. However, if you want to go in deep in one of the things that I want to explain today, let us know in the questions in the chat. So I have some slides that are in Spanish, sorry, but I'm gonna just use it as, let me share screen, support of my presentation, and that's here. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Great. So which are our more relevant problems in Colombia, and maybe problems that we share in all the region, and basically is that people is not trusting in the democracy, and it's all the time, or even more frequently, thinking that the system, democratic system, it's not working, don't trust in it. There is so much insatisfaction with politicians' decisions, and that it means, in one sense, that people don't trust in all the system in general. And many people, as you see in 2021, in the last numbers I show in my slides, are thinking, more people is thinking that Colombia is not a democratic country. So there is a challenge for people who's trying to imagine democratic countries and more democratic ideas, and how we can be involved in democratic process, what it means to be involved. And when we are talking about our role, or thinking which is our role in the democracy, that it stands sometimes so maybe not close or difficult to imagine, Instituto thinks that we could do many things, and especially with some publics or audience, to change this horrible panorama. So there is more information about what we are worried in our country, and the interesting that I want to talk to you is just in Colombia. Right now I'm in Washington. I was last week in New York, 2 weeks ago in Brazil, and in all these places people is saying almost the same. Anybody is trusting in democracy, people feel that we need to change something, but not necessarily know what have to change. And it is dangerous due to this anti-democratic position, or no sense of democratic system for normal people, citizens of the common citizens, allow that many figures that not are democratic arise in the power in some countries. So that is the imminent risk that we see. So which is our focus, or our work focus on? It is try to imagine how we can have a very good balance and better conversations between who take decisions and between people, citizens that want better decisions of that who are in the power. And that's the reason that we need to open that kind of institutions where the people who is in the power take decisions for the people who is representing or voting or citizens in general. So our job is very focused in these two audiences. We work with people who are in the power. We try to support and not try. We are trying, no, just supporting people who is running elections with new perspective, because we are sure that we need to new people in that power. But also we work with institutions and public servants that are usually during long time in institutions, managing all the money, all the decisions, all the process that affect our lives as citizens, and how we can also through that people change the structures of the institutions that sometimes we feel not are working as well as we need. And also, it's quite important to work with citizens and civil organizations who are thinking or who wants to change that structures, but not only with us, maybe the people who is in this meeting are interested in these topics. Also, we are working with that kind of people that usually not participate, because that people is usually that thinks democracy is not important, democracy is not affecting me, or not that word is difficult in English for me, but it is not a benefit for me. So one of point that we are learned through these 4 years working in Instituto is that we need more public servants involved in our projects, and also more citizens, non-organized citizens, vinculated in that participation process, especially. Why? Usually we are seeing that many people is working with politicians, because we already know that politicians have the power. So we try to advocacy in their decisions, or pretend to change their decisions or influence them. But when the politicians change every 4 years almost, the public servants stay, and the public servants have the memory of the institution. And if the institutions doesn't change or don't change, the structure of this system continuously or permanently stay as it is not working. So public servants are quite important to train, to involve, and to empower who see that they could change or improve their process. And with not organized citizens, it's quite important to work due to maybe it is sometimes not close of us that reality, because we are working in these civil organizations, but there are many people that don't care the system, and both maybe because they receive economic benefit, it occurs so frequently in Colombia, or they are not interested because feels that policies and politics are not directly related with their life, real life, and do this connection is quite difficult, but not just is a thing due to not interest or untrust. It is also due to many people who is not involved in this kind of process. It's due to no time. People who is working and trying to eat and have a family and try to get a job and can involve and execute in a very good way their citizen role in this society. So in many participation process, we decide to get more conditions to allow that kind of people to participate. So during those 4 years, 60%, so young organization, but we are trying to imagine that we can build bridge between these different trio factors. So we are trying to imagine how politicians and public servants can work together better, but also public servants understand the citizen better, and also trying to bridge citizens with politicians. We are trying to experiment in different ways in these relationships. Also building trusting relationships between and within these actors, these stakeholders in this democratic system. And one of the focus of my coordination is advocacy. And sometimes when we are working in this kind of process, maybe if you have any advocacy process in the communitarian level or national level, it's quite difficult to measure it. So you can do a participation process and do a forum or an assembly, but then after implementation, how you can measure really that the advocacy, the objective that advocacy it is full, or that goal is completed. Usually it is so hard to measure. We are trying to imagine and reimagine how we can measure our processes in advocacy line. So we work in two big projects. One is Ocupar la Política, that it means occupy the policy or the politics in this case. And that's the program that we have especially for leaderships who wants to run in elections in Colombia. So we were supporting during 3 years, 3 electoral process, more than 100 leaderships, collective leaderships, and that's super important to have more details in this project, due to many people ask me, but you are helping people that traditionally could be win the elections, or what kind of people are you supporting in Occupy la Política? So people who is in this program have specific characteristics for stay in Occupy la Política. For example, it's people that don't have any resource to finance their campaign, not budgeting for campaign. Traditional politicians all the most have enough resources to have a good campaign with all the resources, etc. So this is people who doesn't have these resources. Also, they have to be collective leaderships or emergent leaderships who works with the community, who have the process with the community. They can demonstrate us that they are working in a collective process, because many people is arriving to the politics just because it looks nice, or they want to have power or be in this taking decision process. But we think as Exituto that we should have more people who is representing collective process and not individual process. Also, we are trying to imagine that we can support this process with technology. We all the time are mixing democracy and technology as a facilitator of many process and reducing the cost, for example, in campaign. And we support them with a special civic technology, but also with experts that help them to imagine what is a campaign and how they can do. If I ask to you, how many of you know the structure of campaign and know how build a campaign, many of you maybe don't have any idea. And that's also the thing that happens with that leaderships that maybe are trying to the power structures and trying to run the elections, but they don't have any idea to that Shark Tank that they are going inside when they decide go in elections. So in Ocupar la Política, we are trying to change or renew the people who is arriving to the power. And happily, I have to say that we are very good examples of congresses, councillors who are in this moment referent in our country, changing different politics, and were in our program. In the other line of work, that it's habitar la política or inhabit the politics, we are going through the next moment of the process after elections. And when you promise us and promise to the people that you want to do something different, inhabitants, the politics is how you gonna be in the power, how you gonna inhabit the politics if you say that you want to change it. So we are facilitating participatory process, deliberative process for the politicians who wants to change. It is not a commitment with us. They are committed with the people that want to change the way to do the things. So in Inhabitant Politics, we have different kind of projects to strengthen the advocacy capacities to the civil organizations of movement or whatever who wants. So we have a training process with these kind of citizens in general. Also, we have a participatory process, participatory budgeting, citizen assemblies, combination of these kind of process and many other who try to put in the same scenario to the take decision people in general, public servants and politics, and citizens to deliberate and co-create what they want to create. We don't have any specific agenda. We just open participatory and facilitate participatory methodologies, and they can imagine what, or they can put their agenda in that participatory exercise. Our three main values in this organization is always try to imagine how we can reduce costs or facilitate the processes with technology. Also, we are very strict with the multipartyism criteria. We can't just work with the right or the left. We have to work with all the political spectrums because if we want to strengthen the democracy, we have to know that democracy is to recognize difference of positions. And in that way, we need to understand how wing people, right or left-wing people, are trying to imagine this democratic process. And in this work, especially to define multipartyism criteria, we see which is the difference between democratic politicians or people in general and anti-democratic politicians. Right now, maybe in our world, sometimes in dependent of the context, but right now, at least in America, the right wing and anti-democratic people are sitting in the same place, and we have to distinguish or distinct, I don't know if it is the word, but separate that people, because there is definitely people who is democratic people in the right wing, and separate of that kind of people that is not democratic. And that difference is quite difficult to understand and to observe, but we are thinking and trying to do many criteria to help us as society to separate these different two groups. And also the last important value that I would like to tell you, it is inclusion and diversity. And that sounds very beautiful when I say that many people is working with inclusion and diversity, but it is so hard to include really in our process. Why? Because when you are talking about inclusion or diversity, it has a cost, and a high cost. If you want to include people with disability to listen, so you need to have any resource to traduce to that people. Or if you want to do a training process for indigenous and Afro-Colombian people, you have to also have the resources to have trainer processes and training teachers that understand the cosmovision of different people and cultural positions. So I just want to explain in that general level what are we doing, just to show you that as Alejandro is working in observing and following up policies, but Menderson is an activist who is directly in the process of implementation of the peace agreement. There is another options like this organization that we are working, civil society, as citizens that can directly imagine or reimagine how our democracy works and how we can help, at least in a good way, to support what they are not doing in the system or in the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can already see some questions in the chat, but before going to them, I would like to take a minute for our participants. So for this project, as I already mentioned, we received funding from Engagement Global and Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany. So that means we need to do a lot of reporting, and that means we would like to ask you to fill in a really quick poll that will appear right now on your screens. It is really short and simple, and we will be very grateful for you to fill that in. It will take just a couple of minutes of your time. And while you do that and think of your questions, I also have a couple of questions for our speakers. And if you allow me, I would like to start with our first speaker, Alejandro. So you talked about the peace agreement implementation, but if you could briefly describe how was the peace building process happening in Colombia. I know that Colombia also used direct democracy instrument for trying to implement this peace agreement by referendum, which people did not support. And if you could describe why do you think public did not support the peace agreement and how the public is accepting still the implementation of peace agreement now. Thank you.
Bueno, digamos que lo primero que habría que decir es que Colombia, digamos, es un país con una tradición democrática institucional importante.
The first thing to say is that Colombia is a country with a institutionalist democratic tradition.
Y, digamos, principalmente a partir de la Constitución de 1991 se fortalecieron los mecanismos democráticos de participación.
And with the 1991 Constitution, the democratic mechanisms were...
I'm very sorry, I have to interrupt you. Maria Alejandra, your screen is still shared. Thank you.
So sorry.
Sorry for the interruption, please go on.
Entonces, con la Constitución de 1991, los mecanismos democráticos de participación pues se fortalecieron, por lo menos en la norma.
With the 1991 Constitution, the democratic mechanisms were strengthened, at least normatively.
El problema en Colombia ha sido llevar lo que está en la norma a la realidad.
The problem in Colombia has been to take in that what is in the normative structure to the reality.
Y en particular, digamos, hacer efectiva, digamos, la participación de las personas
particularly to make effective the people's participation
a través de estos mecanismos o del voto o espacios de participación.
through these mechanisms, the voting or participatory spaces.
Ya, digamos, con el plebiscito del acuerdo de paz, digamos como que hay varias razones por las que ganó el no.
There are several reasons why the no was the answer in the plebiscite that was held regarding the peace agreement.
Una de ellas tiene que ver con un desconocimiento sobre lo que proponía el acuerdo de paz.
One of them has to do with the misinformation or that people didn't know what the peace agreement was standing for.
Otra cosa importante es que quienes hicieron oposición a que se aprobara el acuerdo, pues digamos, tergiversaron o dijeron mentiras acerca de lo que el acuerdo decía.
Well, another reason is that the people who were opposing the peace agreement lied or malinformed about what the peace agreement was about.
Y eso, por supuesto, digamos, confunde a las personas a la hora de ir a votar, digamos, sobre si apoyaron o no el acuerdo de paz.
And that confuses people when they go voting, whether they want or didn't want the peace agreement.
Y esa es la razón por la cual la diferencia entre el sí y el no en ese momento fue muy corta.
That's why the difference between yes and no was so short in that moment.
Y a pesar de que en Colombia tenemos, digamos, como institucionalmente varios mecanismos de democracia directa,
Even though in Colombia we have several mechanisms of direct democracy,
nuestro problema son las condiciones en las cuales se da esa participación.
our problem are the conditions in which that participation takes place.
Especialmente en lo que tiene que ver con las condiciones de seguridad
Especially regarding security conditions
y con la manera en la que se recoge o el Estado recoge, digamos, los insumos de la participación.
and the way the state gathers the supplies or the supplies of this kind of participation.
Podemos tener digamos, un buen diseño institucional, digámoslo, pero hay problemas para que el derecho a la participación sea efectivo.
We have a good institutional platform, but the problems begin with the way the participation is effectively counted.
Thank you very much. And my next question is to Menderson. You already talked a little bit about that briefly, but if you could explain a little bit more the situation previously and currently in Colombia for minorities and the role of minorities in activism.
Menderson, ya hablaste un poco de esto, pero ¿podrías ahondar un poquito más sobre el rol de la población minoritaria en Colombia?
I'm not sure if Menderson is still here because I think his internet fell down.
Okay. Yeah, probably his internet is not working at the moment. We can try to wait for a little bit. In the meantime, I would like to remind our participants for the forum. And I can see now the message in the chat that the poll has disappeared very quickly. So if maybe you could maybe shut down the poll and start again, Catherine, I think that might work, hopefully. But thank you for filling in the poll. And I don't know if Menderson, can you hear us now? I I guess there are still problems with the internet, and then I would like to address my question to Maria Alejandra. You mentioned people do not trust in democracy in Colombia, but also in the region. Maybe you can share your ideas on why it is like that currently in Colombia, and what can help turn more people to the roads towards more democracy or to this democratic path.
Sure, I think that it is difficult, and it is important that more civil organizations or civil society organizations do the exercise to analyze what are the determining factors or reasons in each society to that untrust or unconfidence in the democracy, and specifically in their own systems. But in general, this attitude of think or feel that democracies are not working, it is too related with the sense that democracy and politicians especially, I don't think that we should have to talk about democracy in general, more specifically about the politicians and institutions that not represent all the democracy, what is the democracy, are not responding the necessities of the people, and obviously it is due to not just for the corruption in general terms, that scandals and mediatic problems that we saw all the days in many countries, but also with the idea that after pandemic and before pandemic, then it would be super interesting to do that analysis, how change the perception of or satisfaction with the system during, after, and before pandemic. And it's like the quality of life of majority of people in our world get worse during and after pandemic. And maybe many people have the idea that this crisis situation could improve the political system because it's a crisis and challenge, and maybe in a challenge you can innovate and reimagine what it is not working as well before. But it is not a good response of this demand of the people, and people continuously see a very damage, or I forgot the word, but it is more like I forgot the word, sorry. Okay, again. So many people felt that democracy not respond to their necessities during pandemic. Corruption definitely is one of that point. And I think that the sense of the unique way to participate or get involved in democracy is just vote. And this is related with your second part of the question. And working the civic engagement is definitely one of the things that we should have to do as society, because it is also part of our work as citizens, not just vote and pretend that with our vote democracy works very well because we are just getting all the power to some people. If recognize that democracy implies more actions as the citizens we are, as also obligate the politicians to really have the actions that they promise in campaign, or at least explain us why it's not possible. Be citizen, it's also have directly actions to try to change what we are thinking that it's not working. And with direct actions, it don't mean that we have to or we have the power to finish with the life of some institutions. It is more related with how we can also create our own structures as civil society, our process in the communitarian levels, and not just hope or wait that all it is occurring in the app or in the AI, in the high part of this pyramid that we are thinking gonna change our life. So it's more about take actions, have more facilities to get involved in politics and democracy in the communitarian levels, collective levels, and try to bring to the politics to this level and not in the high pyramid that I feel that many people see the politicians as people who is very, very, very privileged, who have all the resources to be there, who usually are rich, and these inequalities, it is also so hard to manage in our context. I would like to just mention a case in Colombia. In 2021, we have a national strike, and this national strike started when minister who is in charge of the budget of the nation said a wrong price of the eggs in Colombia. He said something like, but eggs have a cost of 200 pesos, but many years ago, eggs are more than 500 pesos. And people in this moment were in pandemic moment, very stressful due to the situation, the economic situation, and recognize that that guy who support the government, specifically managing the budgeting, doesn't any idea about the reality of the prices of the people for food, simple egg, starts a big strike in our country. And that's insatisfaction, and that sense of that people who's in the power don't meet the reality and have many privilege. I think that it's the most important thing that we have to fix. More politicians, more humility in these politicians, and less privilege for them.
Thank you very much. I think we are quickly running out of time, but we still can turn to the questions in the audience. Katrin, if you could voice them.
So I couldn't hear all you said because my earphone died. But there is a question. What do you think it would take for the peace agreement to be fully implemented in the stipulated time? What kind of actors and stakeholders should be involved and how? I don't know if you already discussed it. The question? No. But Menderson, he cannot join the meeting again because his internet fell down, but he sent me his answer. So should I?
If you send it, you the answer to this question?
Yeah.
Yeah, then if you could read it, please.
Yes, so his answer is a lot of pedagogy in all scenarios, media, TV, schools, and colleges, a bigger budget from the nation and international cooperation, adaptation in law, and disposition of local and departmental mandatories, more impartiality of the control bodies, and more humanity. That was his answer.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Alejandro, you would like to add anything to that? If you do, please, if you can limit to maybe 2-3 minutes before it's already almost the time to end the webinar.
No, una respuesta corta sería que digamos que se necesita principalmente, digamos, voluntad política de parte del gobierno.
A short answer to this would be that there is a political willingness from the government.
Porque en el gobierno anterior de Iván Duque realmente, digamos, no implementó muchas acciones para impulsar el acuerdo de paz.
Because the former government from Iván Duque did not make enough efforts to implement this peace agreement.
Y es por eso que hoy tenemos unos bajos niveles de implementación.
That's why we have so low levels of implementation.
Así que si el gobierno actual se compromete con el acuerdo de paz, podríamos tener un avance importante.
So if the actual government actually compromises with the peace agreement, we could have a better advance in this subject.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, our speakers and our guests for joining us. And I encourage every one of you and very welcome you to join our next webinars on every Wednesday of November at the same time and the same Zoom link. Yes, I would just ask our speakers to end this webinar with maybe one short message of hope for us activists and actively participating citizens from all over the world. What can we do to promote democracy and live in a more democratic and just society? If you could give us just one or two phrases. Alejandro, would you like to start?
Bueno, yo creo que vamos, a pesar de que a veces es difícil, digamos, transformar el mundo.
Well, I think that despite sometimes it is quite hard to transform this world,
creo que vale la pena en el largo plazo como perseverar, digamos, en esas luchas, digamos, que llevamos a cabo en nuestra cotidianidad.
it is worth the while to keep on going and persevere in these social fights that we want to make and happen.
Porque eso es lo que permite que otras personas después, digamos, tengan mayores libertades y, si se quiere, como más acceso a derechos que nosotros.
That allows for other people to have more access to liberties and human rights than us.
Gracias.
Thank you. And Maria Alejandra, if you also have a message of hope for us.
Oh my gosh, many messages. But I think that try to be imagine or reimagine this system and be creative. Sometimes we are focused on the same idea or trying to do all times the same to change our reality. And this system, democratic system, looks so close and maybe rigorous, but it is possible to have some lights of imagination and creation, and especially for the last message, I think that it's so important work in a collaboration process. Many organizations are just in a competition way, and have more collaboration and try to work more together is also part of change that we are trying to in the democracy system.
Thank you very much. And with that, thank you very much, everyone who joined us, and hopefully